Ho ho ho, Merry Christmas. There are some really nice games on sale, and as I was sat here eating too much chocolate, chucking logs on the fire, I thought to myself, I could compare these prices to various takeaway foods, or I could sit there and eat more chocolate. And well, this is the decision I made. I think it might be the right one. Remember to save yourself 10% on any of these games. I hope you've had a very nice Christmas, whatever you're doing. And with all of that said, what are some games that I think you might want to check out on the Switch eShop sale? Well, let's find out. First up then we have the delightful Ender Lilies Quieters of the Nights. I reviewed this for us on the channel and it got an excellent score, no spoilers, check out the link in the description, but it's a brilliant Souls-like Metroidvania featuring a young girl who has a knight join her on her adventures and who essentially fights for her. It has similarities to games like Hollow Knight and Dark Souls, including benches that you rest on. There are lots of different moves that you can add to your character, and again you'll do that in a very familiar fashion through equipping different spirits. It's quite somber and a little morose at times, but I love the art style and the overall aesthetic of the game. It really lends itself to this style of play. It clocks in at 1.9 gigs and it's developed by Livewire and I believe co-developed by AdGlobe. That's on sale until January the 5th. Now I'm playing through Sports Story for a review on the channel, but I picked up Golf Story a few months back so that I could get it played and finished before Sports Story, and I failed because I was too busy. But I have played a little Golf Story and it's brilliant, and I could see why it had so much hype following its launch. It essentially takes golf, but don't be fooled, this isn't just a pure golf game. It's a story-based adventure that has the golf mechanic thrown in and uses that to essentially facilitate different storylines and some old school questing. It's very fun, it has a brilliant soundtrack, and it's one of those games that will make you laugh out loud, which for me is always a nice bonus. Now at the moment this one is minus 56%, aka 56% off until January the 1st, and I believe there is a 2-player mode in here as well. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled and make sure you're subscribed if you want to catch the review of Sports Story, which should be in the next day or so. The brilliant Borderlands LEgendary collection is on sale in every region at the moment. In America it's 80% off, and it is the lowest it's ever been. Now this didn't make my first person shooters list because it fits into a very specific category, which in my opinion is co-op shooters. Now you can play it solo and it's very fun that way, but if you've got a group of you together online, it's incredible. Now this features motion controls, it's obviously published by 2K, and really the main and only negative for me about this package is the size. It's about 21 gigs. Now that being said, it does include the original Game of the Year edition game as well as Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, so there's hundreds of hours of content here, and there's always something fresh about finding a brand new gun that's better than your friends. Now that sale goes on until January the 11th, and as I say, 80% off. YOKU's Island Express should not be passed. Not only because it's only £3.19, which is a ridiculously cheap price. I mean, you'd struggle to get a box of Tesco finest mince pies for that kind of money, but also because it's a brilliant Metroidvania that's deceptively, and I want to say this nicely, it doesn't look as good as it is. Like, I know that looks good, right? It looks colourful and stuff, but if I was to see that, I'd be like, oh, it's a pinball game, not really my bag. I think I'll skip it. But actually, it's a Metroid game where you're a Metroidvania game where you get to control a beetle, but then it's combined with pinball as well, and it works beautifully with an incredibly good soundtrack, and the visuals just top it off. Yeah, don't be fooled. Don't do what I did, which was to look at Glen's review and go, no, I won't bother with that. And then I went and played it myself and was like, man, that's a lot more fun than it looked, to me anyway. Now that, as I say, 80% off until January the 4th. Then we've got Phoenotopia Awakening. I love this game. It's possibly in my top 10 on Switch of all time. and that's another video that I think we probably need to make rather than just 2022. But at the moment it's its cheapest ever price, 50% off, and it's one that scored, I think it was 92% on our channel when I reviewed it, and it's essentially a side view Zelda 2 clone. If you remember Zelda 2 back in the day, it has many of those gameplay elements, but it's brutal. There are some very tough boss fights, there's a big open world to explore, and yeah, another one that will put a real smile on your face with some of its dialogue. Now, Darkest Dungeon is well up my alley. I absolutely love games like this. Anything like Slay the Spire, Darkest Dungeon, that uses those mechanics that on the face of it can seem quite simplistic, but once you really dive into them, become so compelling. They always appeal to me for some reason. Now, it describes itself as a role-playing strategy adventure, but it has what's known as the Affliction system, where not only are you fighting against monsters, but your character will get very stressed out, and as you fight and go on in the game, they'll start to get paranoia build up, as well as fear, and they'll become irrational, and it just adds a nice little spin and a bit of spice into the formula that you might be already used to. There are, I believe, 16, if I'm not mistaken, characters that you can play as, and there are game modes that will allow for permadeath as well. Now, the expanded version of the game is currently the cheapest it's ever been. You could just go for the base version, but I think it's one that once you play, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. So yeah, buy this deluxe edition. That sale ends around January the 2nd.
My obsession caused this great foulness.
If you missed it, we released our best first-person shooter games of 2022 list just last week in our 12 days of SwitchUp, and Ion Fury happily made that list. It comes from 3D Realms, the creators of Duke Nukem, and it features John St. John in, well, at least in voice form as one of the characters. I don't want to spoil it, but you play as a female protagonist here, and it is essentially Duke Nukem 2 in air quotes if you took the old school Duke 3D and just made a sequel. It's very fun, really enjoyable, some good weapons. It looks just like Duke, and it runs beautifully. It even has those old school explosions, if you remember it. They look like they were kind of animated and then stuck in as flat pixel sprites, which they, to be fair, they probably were. Really enjoyed this one, but it's not on sale in the EU regions. It's $6.24. That's a 75% saving. If you like first-person shooters, pick it up. Now, Unmetal reminded me so much of Hot Shots Part 2. If you've not seen that, then you definitely should. It's with Charlie Sheen. It is Charlie Sheen, isn't it? Not Martin Sheen. Oh, I forget. Anyway, it's essentially Metal Gear Solid with humour, and at the moment it is 60% off, I think, but that's only until December the 29th, so you've only got a couple of days. For about £7, you're getting a really nice adventure game that has stealth elements. So there are some sections that require you to creep round enemies, all of the things that you'd expect, but then it will throw you into a boss against a ravaging army of rats, or a load of warriors style thugs, and yeah, it will do that for the entirety of the game. It will constantly shift and you'll be like, what the hell is going on? But I can guarantee, I think if you've got tastes like mine, you'll really enjoy this one. Now the Red Strings Club, it's a bit of a hidden gem and it's also a bit niche. This one's 67% off. It comes from Devolver Digital, which straight away tells you a lot about the style of experience you might get, aka something a bit different. It's just £4.45 at the moment, and weirdly is part of a growing subgenre of games where you play as a bartender. It has a full cyberpunk narrative, and as you get customers come into your establishment, you'll have to mix them up the perfect drinks and cocktails, which will then change their emotions and help you to solve what's going on. There's a lovely soundtrack underlying the whole experience, which makes a huge difference to me, but it's something very different, but also well worth your time if this appeals to you. It fits into a diddy little 291 megabyte download, and you're looking at about 4 to 7 hours to finish it. Kind of reminds me of Coffee Talk, if you've played that, but again, you've only got a couple of days before this sale ends. Finally, on this little midweek sale, then we've got Fugue Melodies of Steel. This was such a hidden gem when it came out. I don't know if I'm the only one. It's always been slightly more expensive, so I think a lot of people have avoided it. And it's still probably the most expensive game on this list, but it is definitely worth it. On the one hand, it looks a bit like a few games you may remember from the past. Things like Advanced Wars, on those side-scrolling battles. You've got your tanks, which have the different crew members that you've met along the way. You can build up your friendships with them by doing little mini side quests and talking to them. And you can actually walk around the interior of your tank between missions, in air quotes. You choose the path that you take along a map that essentially shifts and has different routes with different rewards and different enemies to fight. Now, the difficulty here is that you have to synergize between your crew members. So some of them will get on better with each other, and you choose which weapon that they take and which area of the tank they take place in. And then those choices change the types of damage that those weapons do. And then certain weapons will require certain enemies. I think I said that the wrong way around. Certain enemies will require certain weapons, and you need to match those up. And it might sound really, really odd, but it's brilliant. There's also a ton of DLC for this one. I think they were surprised by how well it did. And there's also a sequel coming. All of the versions are on sale, so go and get yourself a very, very enjoyable game that maybe you've never heard of or never played. So that's it for this very small first step back into the world of SwitchUp after having eaten too much cake and just enjoying Christmas. If you enjoyed the video, then let me know in the comments. Make sure you save 10% if you want to buy any of these games. And as always, from Glen and I, thanks to all of you, and for all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!